Tree Business, helping tree services succeed.
All right, this is one of our jobs we have going on in Fairhope. So I pulled up, put my cones out. They've got their sign out. This is a pretty low use neighborhood, but want to make sure everybody knows what's going on. We got our cones out. Grapple truck here. Looks like they'll probably move that into a better location. Bucket truck. And then we use these little Isuzus. We got these nap pad bodies. And then we keep a stump grinder and a little mini articulated loader on that trailer. And then down the street we've got a F350 single rear wheel with a trailer that we pull a spider lift. So first thing when we get to the job, we're kind of looking to make sure everything is set up, and then we've got our job briefing form is filled out and signed. We go over the client's information, the nearest hospital, all the different things like that, and then I'm going to add my name here after reading over everything, and it checks out. So announce my presence to the job, let them know. We've got our tarp with a first aid kit. Everybody understands where that is. And then here's the job site. We've got spider lift set up in the backyard. Haven't been back here, so we're walking together. Get back here. I shouldn't be walking into danger. So we've got our drop zone set up with these green cones. So what happens is they communicate, about what's going on inside there. And then, before he drops something, he's able to let them know, hey, make sure everybody's out of the drop zone. And then obviously before they come in the drop zone, then, they're able to figure that out and make sure everybody's on the same page with that. So if we look at their work order, it's going to show exactly what they're doing on this job. It'll have the client's information. It'll have some pictures, things like that. This is our bucket defender we put on there after catching several low limbs. We started putting these on our forward facing buckets. It's got a lid that closes over the top of it, and then protects the bucket. But the main thing is just trying to create an area where limbs can go over or hit the limb or wire or whatever it is. So let's see. So this is our timesheet. This is going to show me who all is on this job, who the client is, their address, what we're doing. This is their work order. It's going to show us all the equipment that we need for it, the information for the job, things like that, showing us access. So let's see, the red X is removal, black X is stump grinding, things like that. So it'll be pretty obvious where that is. They can line up and find all these trees. We got other options. We can use a map and all kind of different things. So anyway, that's pretty much it.
All right, here it is, the moment you've all been waiting for. How to make $1 million in the tree business. So I want to start off by saying I am not an attorney. I'm not a CPA. I'm just a tree guy. I'm an arborist. We're going to talk about this, and we may talk about some tax things. We talk about a few things, maybe even some legal issues, things that I know that I'm aware of. But again, it's not tax advice. It's not legal advice. All right, so you take the $1 million. You divide that by the number of work weeks in a year. So you could say, okay, there's 52 weeks in a year. For me, 52 weeks is not a realistic number because we want to take out for holidays, rain days, sick days, vacation, whatever. Like there's going to be times when we can't work for whatever that reason is And maybe it's a day that we're paying, people to take off. Maybe it's a day that, that is just, rough, like maybe New Year's Day, like not really that good of a day to work. Maybe it's the day after Thanksgiving or Christmas Eve. Like there's going to be days when it may not be an official holiday, but it may not make sense to work. And so, for us, 50 weeks works really well. For you, you can figure out whatever you want. So we're going to take out about 2 weeks. So we're going to take that million, divide it by 50 weeks. So we do that and we get $20,000 per work week. All right. So now we've got to figure out how we're going to get $20,000 per work week. So we got to divide that by how many days that we're going to be working during that week. For us, that's 5. It's Monday through Friday. We actually had a crew go out today on an emergency job. That was last night. So it happens, we work Saturday, we work Sunday sometimes. But on average, we're working 5 days a week. We're not trying to work every weekend. If we were, and there are companies out there that work, 6 or even 7 days a week, I think that can be a mistake. I think you're burning yourself out and your people out. But, whatever your numbers are that you're using, then use that. And so these same type of calculations can be done for, say, a fast food restaurant that is open 7 days a week. But for us, Monday through Friday, 5 days a week. So we're going to take the 20,000 divided by 5. So 20,000 divided by 5 is 4,000. So we need to bring in $4,000 per work day. So, that's pretty realistic. I won't say it's easy, okay, but it can happen. You could do that with a crew. You don't have to have multiple crews to bring in $4,000 per work day. But let's break that down by the hour and see what that looks like. So $4,000 divided by the hours on the job. And for us, I like 8 hours on the job. Yes, sometimes we're done sooner. Sometimes we're there a little longer. And this does not include, somebody showing up to the shop, packing equipment up, traveling somewhere, set up, breakdown, traveling back, fueling trucks up, whatever. So that might be another 2 hours a day. So if we're 8 hours on the job, somebody might actually be clocked in for 10 hours on that day. But if we're talking about the hours on that job, and so we can talk about expenses later, but right now we're just talking about, where the money's coming from and how to bill for that, and how to get that set up. So if we're trying to figure out, this isn't like some huge math problem. This is fairly easy that anybody can do. And so I just want to go over those numbers with you. So we're going to take that $4,000 per day. We're going to divide that by 8 hours. And so now we've got $500 per hour. Now, this isn't per man per hour. This is for the whole crew, whatever that crew looks like, whether it's a 1-person crew or a 20-person crew or whatever it is. Like we're just talking numbers here. So $500 per hour for that crew on the job. Now, if we divide by the number of people on the job, and that might be just 2 if it's a really small crew, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever it is. I think you get up around 6 people, and it's going to be really hard to make money. I think with 2 people, it's going to be really hard to do $500 per hour, and so I'm comfortable using 4 for the purposes of this exercise. Let's use 4. So we've got 4 people working. Okay, we're not talking about in the office. We're not talking about selling jobs or anything else. Right now, we're just talking about like their billable hours. Somebody that's out on the job working. And so for this math, let's use 4 crew members. So we've got $500 per hour for that crew divided by 4 people that are on that crew. You're looking at $125 per man per hour. So you really have to start asking yourself, what are you paying per man per hour? Okay. What other expenses are there? And don't forget, we just talked about, like, you're going to have another, I'd say, even if the job's right around the corner, you're going to have another hour by the time somebody packs the truck up, checks the fluids, gets their gear, drives to the job, drives back, peels the truck up, stuff like that. But, maybe even two. So, we can't just be thinking about per hour on the job, but, you've got to make sure that you can squeeze that in there, what you're paying, per hour, and the other expenses that come along with that. But don't fall into the trap of underestimating. So this is the kind of math that I see all the time. Somebody says, well, my guys cost me X number of dollars per hour, or, X number of dollars per day. That's fairly common. They say, I pay somebody whatever it is per day. Plus I've got, something in fuel, a dump fee, some job expenses, and what's left over is my profit. And I say this is fuzzy math because it's leaving way too many things out. And you'll see as we go through this exercise, like it doesn't really work that way. So let's say, and again, this is the fuzzy math. This is not what I'm recommending that you do. This is the stuff that I see people do, and I like shake my head at. But they think, okay, we had a $4,000 job. We got, and whatever this labor cost is, right? Yours might be $3,000, it might be $200, whatever it is. So I just threw some numbers in here: $900 in labor, $100 for fuel and bar oil, $100 dump fee. Let's say we had a service drop, we needed it, and that was another $100, $100 for a permit. And let's say it was beginning of the year, or maybe in a city we don't work very often, and we need a business license, to go do that. So you got to buy that. You broke a few fence boards, whatever. So, if you're looking at $1,500 worth of expenses, then, the $4,000 minus that $1,500 is $2,500. And somebody saying, hey, I made $2,500. And I'm telling you, that is fuzzy math. That is not true. That is not the way it works. I know that a lot of people are going to do that math, but let's go ahead and go through it. So, are you remembering the taxes that come along with that labor? Payroll taxes, unemployment tax, things like that. Are you remembering insurance? Your GL and your workers' comp is tied to that labor. Are you forgetting benefits if you have any? Any downtime? Forget about the couple of, well, don't forget about it, but we know we have those couple of hours in the morning, the afternoon, that are non-productive hours. But also, let's say there's a day, everybody's at the shop for training, or maybe there's, a day that everybody's organizing or washing trucks or whatever. So you've got to figure that in, all inclusive. That $100 for fuel, I think somebody's just reaching there. They're just going, I think it's roughly this much because that's what it costs to fill the truck up. But maybe it's less, maybe it's more. Maybe the dump fees are inconsistent. You don't have a service drop, obviously, on every job. You might not need permits for every job. That city business license you bought, that's good for a year. So maybe there was only one job that you're using that on. Maybe there are 100 jobs that you wind up doing in that city that are on that business license. And so if there's 100 jobs, then that business license really only costs like $1 per job. So we don't need to figure it into just one job. That fence board, yeah, you bought it. You went to the store and you bought a few fence boards, but who fixed it? Somebody had to actually fix it. And if it's somebody, that's on payroll, then we got to pay that person to do that. If it's you, well, we're going to see, like, that's really not any better because you need to be figuring your time in. And so there's a lot of missing expenses here. Maybe some are up, maybe some are down. I don't think that on a $4,000 job that you're going to make $2,500 profit. It's just not realistic. So the annual profit with that fuzzy math, all right, so let's take the $2,500 times 5 days a week times 52 weeks per year. All right, so $650,000 profit. Now, we're not talking about we brought in this amount. Remember, this is $4,000. So, I mean, that's $1 million plus worth of work brought in. But you telling me that you made, right, from just going out with this one crew, you made $2,500 that day, and that you made $650,000 of profit. And I'm saying baloney. Like that is not realistic to go out and do that. Could it happen? Sure. Does it happen every day? No, because there's a lot of things that are forgotten about in that. And so that's why we got to be very careful of that fuzzy math. I think it's dangerous too, because people see this fuzzy math and they start thinking, man, I'm getting ripped off at my job. I'm only making whatever per dollar, per hour. And so, I'm only going to make this much per year. And, man, if I was doing this on my own, I could be making this much money, or boss man is making this much money, and, he's just using me. And it really kind of, it sets people up for failure when they start seeing this math and they start kind of following that. And so I want to make sure that everybody understands where the real math comes from and how it works. So you take all your annual expenses, okay? I'm not talking about ones that you make up, ones that you think there are. You actually have that, and you look at an entire year's worth of expenses, everything that you bought, okay? Your rent, if you're paying shop rent or office rent, whatever it is, your fuel, don't just guess per day or how much it costs for you to fill the truck up or whatever, like the entire year, all your business licenses, your entire payroll, all your payroll taxes, all of your insurance, general liability, workers' comp, auto, you might have a bond, you might have, whatever it is, all of that, your chainsaws that you bought, your repairs, maintenance, even the paper in the office, the stamps, your interest on your loans, everything is going to be added up, okay? So then you produce a profit and loss. And this is probably a lot more realistic. I would say even don't be discouraged if you have less profit than this, but you might have more, okay? Certainly. I'm just throwing some numbers and putting this together just so that you can kind of see what this looks like. You take a whole year's worth of income and a whole year's worth of expenses. That is where the profit comes from. Okay. And so for this example, you got $1 million in income, $900,000 in expenses, and you've got $100,000 in profit. So that $100,000 in profit, if you divide that by 50 work weeks, you're at $2,000 per work week. So divided by 5 days, then you're at $400 per day profit. Okay. So this is a whole lot different than what you saw with the fuzzy math, where somebody was supposedly making $2,500 per day. And this is a lot more realistic. And I think that's important for everybody to see that, including the people that are working, go over these numbers, because if you don't, what happens is people make them up. And what they make up is going to be a lot worse than what the real story is. And, they're looking at that and going, man, I know what I make per hour. I know what, we spend on fuel. I know what we're doing. I know what our expenses are, and we're going to deduct that out of that job. Wow. Boss man's making $2,500. Man, he is like making a fortune, and man, we're just out here doing all the work, right? Everybody's kind of heard that. You maybe even said it yourself. So this is probably a lot more realistic. Even if you doubled that and you had a really, really awesome year and you made $200,000 profit, that's still only $800 per day. And $800 is great. That's a lot of money. And I'd love to just walk up and find $800 laying on the side of the road. But 800 even is not 2,500. Okay. So the other part is you got to figure out, did you pay yourself for working, right? Are you one of those people that are on the crew working? And if that's the case, and the whole company profited $400 per day, including you working on the crew and being paid out of this profit versus being paid some other way, like maybe we're not really making near as much money as you think. Because if you left for whatever reason, you got sick, you got hurt, whatever, are you going to be able to pay somebody and pay all the taxes and benefits and insurance and work comp and everything else on top of that to make up for you not being there? And so when you're doing this math, you definitely need to look at, like, if you are on the job, and you need to account for that, because you don't say, okay, well, yeah, I was there and I did work, but really there were 3 guys on the job because I'm not included. I'm like the boss, and I'm like the profiteer or whatever. And so, this is what we made, but that's not really what you made, because you've got to consider that you're the 4th person or 5th or, whatever it is. So we need to make sure that you're considering yourself in that. All right, so don't use fuzzy math. Keep good records so that you can pull accurate reports. Profit is normal, by the way. And so there's a lot of people, they look at that word and go, ooh, man, this is bad. We shouldn't be profiting off of people. The profit is normal. You have to make a profit to stay in business. If you don't make a profit, then you're going to go out of business. And I'll show you why. Because the profit is not just like money that you take home after all expenses are paid, and you go blow on whatever you want to go blow. Like, the profit, it can still be used and often is used to go back into the business, to reinvest into the business and to buy things. And so we need to make sure that we consider that profit is normal, in there. And so if you did this math here, and you come up with $3,600 a day, we definitely don't need to be going out and saying, okay, well, you know what? If I got this job for $3,600, that would cover all of my costs for the day. Now, I wouldn't make any money, but I can do this job for $3,600. No, you can't. You still need the $4,000 per day. Okay. You still need the full amount, because now we're not even talking about, whether you have this goal of $1 million or whatever it is. Like, if you've done your math and you figured out, okay, this is what I have, this is what I need, and this is how much profit that I'm making, you still need that. And so we need to make sure that you're accounting for that in your calculations and in your sales numbers. Don't think that, hey, we don't have to cover our profit for today, we'll just basically work for free. You still need that full amount. So numbers are the language of business. Your main job as the business owner or manager is to look at those numbers. There's a lot of things that you can farm out, and you may have a CPA, you may have an accountant, you may have a bookkeeper, you may have somebody that processes payroll, you may have somebody that does sales, whatever it is. But as the business owner, that's your job to look at the numbers. And you've got to make sure that everything adds up. You got to make sure that, you're not being taken advantage of, but you're also looking at those numbers to figure out where you are. And so there's a lot of people that say, oh, well, I'm not really a numbers guy. But if you're not a numbers guy, like, you're not going to be in business long. So you've got to figure out how to become a numbers guy. All right, so with that $100,000 profit that we had from that example, what you're going to use that for, now you could pay yourself with some of that, sure, but you're going to use that to buy new trucks, to buy new equipment. There may be some investment that you want to make. You might want to expand into another location, and so you're going to need profit to do that. And when you study the books and you figure out where everything is accounted for, there is not a line item that says new truck, okay? That's not how normal P&Ls work, because those are capital expenses. And so those capital expenses come from your profit. So the profit and loss does not show major purchases like trucks and equipment, and just to kind of break that down in accounting, what happens is if you're going to buy, say, a chain for a chainsaw, okay, that chain is only going to last a limited time. So let's all just agree that that chain is going to be used up within 1 year. Okay. Same with maybe a jug of bar oil, something like that. And maybe it's a chain that you only use on one cut every 10 years or something. But normally it's going to be something that's used up within that year, or a small item. So I might buy a trash can, and that trash can is still good 10 years from now, but it doesn't make sense for me to depreciate that trash can out over a period of time. And so that's just going to go into my normal expenses. It's a small ticket item, but the larger ticket items, and there's going to be different breaking points for different organizations. We won't go into that today, but just know that large ticket items, they're not going to show up on your P&L because they're major assets. Okay. So the other thing is the P&L does not show principal loan payments. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have whatever it is, bucket truck or something. For an easy round number, let's say it's a $2,000 payment. $500 of that payment is going to interest, and $1,500 is going to principal. Okay. So you can look at each payment, you can tell where, each dollar is going for everything. So that $500 in interest on this example is going to show up as an expense. Okay. The $1,500 towards principal, that is not going to show up. Now, that was actual cash that came out of your bank account and it got used to pay on that loan, but it's not going to show up as an expense. And so the P&L is not the only financial, piece that you need, but it's going to tell you a really good story of what's happening with your business, over a period of time. But just know that your principal payments on a loan are not going to show up on that P&L. So profit does not equal take-home pay, and also does not equal taxable income. And so it is possible that you can pay income taxes on, hang on. So you pay income taxes on profits after depreciation. And so we'll go into that a little bit. But it's definitely possible that you can pay more tax than you bring home. And that's a head scratcher for some, but we can talk about that a little bit. Very easily as you could pay no tax or very little tax and bring home a lot. So you could be taxed on a lower dollar amount, and you could be bringing home a lot more, a higher dollar amount. So depreciation is the easiest way to manipulate taxable income. And this is legal, by the way. This is not a loophole. This is not some unethical business practice. Like, this is normal. Okay. So the normal, what we would call depreciation, and there's several different types. So basically it would stretch over the life. And so just for an example, let's say we bought a truck and its life expectancy was 10 years, and it was $100,000. So we could split that up. One way would do, okay, we're going to take $10,000 per year on this truck. And at the end of 10 years, then the value is zero. That's basically, what they're doing. Different property is depreciated at different rates. There's accelerated depreciation where you take more on the front end and then less. And that kind of represents the true value of the vehicle. So maybe it's worth a whole lot more when it's new, and it's worth a whole lot less when it's 10 years old. What a lot of people will do is they'll say, hey, at the end of this 10 years, the truck's still going to be worth something. It's not zero. Let's say it's going to be worth $10,000. So they only depreciate 90%. And you can do that. What most people do is that they depreciate the whole thing. And then if they wind up selling it, then whatever they sell it for, then you'll have to pay capital gains tax on that. But don't get lost in the weeds there. All right, so we're talking about normal depreciation. The next is what's known as Section 179. And Section 179 is great because you can take all or a large part of a major purchase in 1 year. The other is bonus depreciation. And very similar in that, probably the most frequently is 50% bonus depreciation. So if you were to buy an item for, say, $100,000, you could take $50,000 the first year, and write that off in depreciation. And then, just use kind of a more normal depreciation schedule to depreciate that out a little bit longer term. Section 179, I want to talk about some more because that is a way that you could, and they change tax laws all the time, but you could potentially take the entire purchase price in the same year that you purchase it, and so that can really offset your taxes there. So when we look at depreciation, so the bank adds back in depreciation when you're calculating that. And so let's say you had a profit of $100,000, you had depreciation of $100,000, and then so that brings your taxable income down to zero. And there are reasons why you really don't want to bring it all the way down to zero, because you're taxed at a very low rate as you get down, and then at a certain point you're still not taxed at all, but you can still show some income. So there's really not a reason to bring it all the way down to zero. But let's just, for this example, let's just say we do, just to keep it very clear, cut and dry. We're not worried about if somebody's married or single or has dependents or whatever else. Let's just keep it easy. So we've got the profit of 100,000, depreciation of 100,000. Now our taxable income is zero. So as you might guess, we paid $0 in taxes. Okay. The bank calculates the income at 100,000 because it adds back in the depreciation. So it takes your $0 taxable income plus your depreciation. And so they're looking at it as you made $100,000. So you could take $1 million in depreciation and the bank would add that back in, and they would look at you and say, you made $1 million, right? And so with $1 million in income, you're going to get approved for a lot of things. So whether it's an expansion of your shop, maybe you're trying to buy some more equipment, you're trying to buy another house, income property, whatever it is, when the bank is looking at you like you make, a lot more money than you actually did. And they know this, and this is why they do it, because they understand that this is where the numbers come from, because they figure, hey, if you were able to write off this amount of depreciation, then that's money that could have been coming to you. So they're a little bit fuzzy there, but that's their system. And so don't think that, hey, in order to make money, I've got to hide it, or I've got to, report the wrong amount, or file some fraudulent tax return, or something like that legally you can bring down your taxable income and pay very little in income taxes. And still, when you take your tax return to the bank, then they're still going to be able to loan you money. And so it's a struggle for a lot of business owners, because you don't want to show a lot of income because you don't want to pay taxes on it. But then when you go to the bank, then they're like, well, you didn't make any money, so we can't loan you any money. And so this is a legal way for you to be able to make money, show that you made money, legally depreciate it so that you can get your taxable income down, and then still be able to buy things. And so I just want to make sure to point out that I'm not suggesting that you need to go out and try to cheat the system or something else. So the IRS actually encourages this, and I'll tell you why. So the IRS has two major, what would you even call it? Probably reasons to exist, or two major reasons, for what they do. And the one is the tax income. Okay, so they want to collect income tax, and they use that to pay for things in government. And there's all sorts of programs, but ultimately, we hear about roads and bridges and things like that. And hey, I like roads and bridges because I like to be able to get from one place to another, and and go down the road and not have to worry about that road being there and the bridge collapsing and everything else. So I like that. And I'm okay when my tax dollars go there. There are a lot of things that I don't really want my tax dollars to go for, but it is what it is. So when we're paying taxes in, we don't really get a choice in how those dollars are spent. The other part is the IRS wants you to legally try to pay as little tax as possible. Now, why would they want to do that? Because if I am trying to legally structure to where I don't pay very much tax, then generally that means I'm going to have to go buy something. Okay. Whenever I go buy something, then that spurs the economy. And so let's say I buy a $100,000 truck. That $100,000 truck, the dealer made money on it. Okay. The transport company that brought it there made money. The state actually makes some money because there's some tax collected on it. The people that are working at that dealership, the manufacturer made money on it. They paid people to make it. They bought steel. They bought parts. There's a 10 times multiplier on things like that. And so that $100,000 truck that I bought is worth $1 million in the economy. So that I said that right. So a $100,000 truck is worth $1 million in the economy because somebody that's working at the factory that made that truck or made a part that went on that truck is now able to take that money home and go buy groceries, go buy their own truck, their own boat. They're able to buy, maybe they buy a house, they build a house, whatever it is. So it keeps the economy going. And so in this fashion, the IRS really encourages business owners to make large purchases and be able to write them off. And so that, this isn't a way for somebody to avoid paying taxes. And you hear all the nonsense out there about, okay, well, this is a way for a business to take a write-off, or, this is somebody taking advantage of a tax loophole or something like that. It's not a loophole. The IRS has that in place. The IRS is an arm of the government, and ultimately they want the economy to keep going. And as the economy keeps going, then people continue to pay in taxes, and they're going to wind up making more off of all the other people that are profiting off of this versus just my tax revenue from that. So anyway, just want to make sure to clarify that. So doing $1 million in work is easier said than done. And so there's going to be some marketing, whether it's somebody walking into your business, which, for me, that just, it doesn't happen. It's mostly phone calls. Maybe it's an email, maybe it's a message of some type. But for the most part, it's the phone ring. And so we've got to spend some money on marketing to make that happen. Okay. Somebody has to schedule appointments. Somebody has to go sell the job. In order to sell enough work to keep a crew going to do that amount of volume, then it's really hard for it to be the person that's on the crew and the person that's out selling. Somebody has to schedule the jobs. You have to have the trucks and equipment for it, and somebody has to keep those trucks and equipment maintained. Not even talking about fixing things. We're talking about just regular maintenance and greasing and changing the oil and things like that. You've got to have the guys to do the work. Somebody's got to process payroll. Somebody has to invoice, collect, do the accounting, make deposits, stuff like that. So if you're looking at this and thinking, hey, I'm going to do this all by myself, like it's going to be really, really hard to do by yourself. So you really can't do it alone. And so even if you're really good and charge a lot per hour, like you're going to need some help. So even if it's just one person helping you, which I wouldn't encourage anybody to go do tree work alone, because you always want somebody that can be there to back you up, that can, if you're in the tree, they can rescue you. They could at minimum call 911, something like that. But, so you're going to have it at least somebody. And if you're trying to go after, $1 million plus, you're going to have some sort of management structure. You're going to have some leadership. You're going to have culture in your organization, and this stuff develops whether you want it to or not. So you could either set that culture or it's going to set itself. And if it sets itself, it's probably going to be something that you really don't want. And so it might be, people coming in late, people drinking on the job, maybe they're doing drugs, maybe they got bad attitudes, they're, whatever it is, you don't want that in your organization. And so you have to be able to set that and say, okay, this is how we do things at this organization, and, and make sure that your hires adhere to that culture, and make sure that, people that are working there continue to adhere to that culture so that you don't lose it. All right, so you look at what type of work. Is it tree removal, stump grinding, lot clearing? Pruning, it is specialized, and we'll talk about pruning much, much more, but for now, just know, maybe you're talking about getting a little bit of clearance over the street or over somebody's house. Maybe you're getting some deadwood out of a tree or something like that, but there's a lot of really, really bad pruning that goes on, and most of it is done for good reason. Somebody thinks they're doing somebody a favor, or just thinks they're doing a good job. But we see a lot of overlifting, a lot of lion's tailing, a lot of stripping out the inner foliage in a tree, which can be really bad for it. Topping would be a good example of poor pruning. And so maybe even just the cut, if somebody's making, a flush cut or something like that. And so I would say that the pruning really is specialized. It's more than just making cuts. Tree removal, not to discount that at all. I think that there is a need for tree removal, but for me, I don't want to be the tree removal expert. And I don't want people thinking, hey, they call me up and their trees are doomed and all we can do is cut them down. Right. So we want to offer a whole lot of other services, but planting, may be part of it. Nothing wrong with that. Consulting, plant health care. There are all sorts of type of work in this industry that you can do. And a lot of them don't involve the chainsaw. But probably the big ones are tree removal and pruning. And so, we're going to talk about that a whole lot more. But there are some tree removals that can be very tricky and can really get somebody hurt or even killed. And so, I don't think that's something that just anybody can go and do. But I think that if you're removing a tree, as far as the tree is concerned, you're not really hurting it anymore because you're removing the whole thing. You might damage somebody or something around it, but that tree itself is going to be gone at the end. Versus pruning, it's not like a haircut. And so many people say, oh, it's just a haircut and it'll grow back. Well, I can cut every hair on my head and they will grow back. If I cut every hair on that tree, they might grow back, but they're definitely going to grow back different. Okay, so every cut that's made on a tree is permanent, and there may be regrowth in areas, and especially depending on the type of cuts that you make. But I think pruning is really special to me because there's a lot of things that you can do with pruning to really help a tree out, really mitigate risk. But just know that there is a whole lot in there. So you're doing this, you got $1 million machine. You have to have systems in place. You've got to have people that are reliable and responsible. You can't have people that are showing up late, never showing up, missing days. Your trucks and equipment must be dependable. If your trucks are always breaking down, you're leaking hydraulic fluid, you're getting towed, you're restructuring, rescheduling jobs, that's a mess. And so you're not going to be able to hit your target numbers. And for me, I definitely did not start out with brand new trucks. And I started out with some really, really, old crummy trucks. And on the one hand, I'm kind of glad that I did, We're lucky that nobody got hurt. But I really wish that we could have gotten nicer trucks, right off the bat. And so, that's just something to really look at, is that you really want to get as new and as nice as you can afford. And, maybe even go over budget, on some of that, just to make sure that you have the nicest, I'm not talking about nice, like leather seats and, leather, sunroof and, electric windows and, things like that. I'm talking about like, reliable, dependable. I'm talking about safe, things like that. And so you really want to try to get as nice as you can. And for us, I bought a lot of trucks, that were used, and, they were always broke. I can just tell you, they were always friggin' broke. And so it was a problem, because that truck would break. Now our whole day is in a whirlwind. I'm supposed to be somewhere else, but I can't be because I'm trying to juggle something. The office is trying to reschedule a job. We get guys they're sitting on the side of the road, and we send another truck to pick them up, and they load all the gear. The truck gets towed, and then we don't know how long it's going to be out, and then we're rescheduling jobs, and it's a mess. Okay. New trucks, ideally, what we want a truck to do is to crank up, work all day, drive to the job, work all day, and drive back. And that's what the truck needs to do. This is not a really great opportunity to save money. Like we're not auto wholesalers where we're buying at a certain dollar amount and then selling that vehicle for a higher dollar amount. There are businesses that can do that and they make money. We're not doing that. We are buying the nicest, best, newest equipment that we can, and we're using it. And when it's worn out, want to get rid of it. So let's look at new trucks and equipment. And so like this truck here, we bought this truck. I think it was $130,000. You go buy that same exact truck now, I'd be surprised if you could buy it for $150, probably closer to $160. You get an elevator, you're probably $200 plus on that. Spider lift, you don't get much for $80,000, but you can get a small lift. Doesn't take much to really get up closer to 200. We've got a couple that are right in that range. Grapple truck. And we're talking new here. Certainly you can go used and you can buy, some older trucks. But if we're talking about new, grapple truck, you're looking about $250,000 to $400,000. Pickup truck, even $40,000, and $40,000 doesn't buy you much. We did buy a couple of brand new trucks that were stripped down, and they were right at 40, with the 7.3 gasser, and they are doing exactly what they need to do. But you don't get much for that 40 anymore. You could very easily climb up to 100. You start talking about, a little nicer package, little nicer wheels, everything adds up. Especially a dually, something like that. You could easily be at 100 on a pickup. A loader, whether it's a, mini track loader or an articulated loader or a skid steer or whatever, 40 doesn't buy you much in those, but you could easily get up to 80 or so there. I can't remember the last time I bought a $2,000 trailer, but it seems like we did, for hauling, a little stump grinder or something like that, or spray rig. But we definitely have trailers that are 12,000 plus that, tilt deck and everything else. So, you can definitely get up there. Stump grinder, again, $30,000 doesn't get you much anymore. You could easily spend $100,000. I know that you can spend more. I've seen some that are really awesome, that are, double that. But you don't really need that, going out. And so certainly there, and you could be less than a 30, you could find one, but just saying 30 doesn't buy you much. That's a pretty good range. Chainsaws, if you bought $3,000 in chainsaws to do, $1 million worth of work, like, I'd be really surprised. I think you're going to be a lot more than that. I don't think you'd be quite at 20. I think you're probably going to be 10 plus. But I think just by looking at some rough numbers here, we can agree that to buy new, just to have the equipment and trucks to be able to go out and do the work, you're looking at least $500,000. You could easily be over $1 million in just, a fleet of trucks and equipment. And, if you run a chipper or an chip truck, you're going to, and then you got climbing gear, you're going to have slings and pulleys, you're going to have rigging systems, you're going to have ropes, you're going to have, all sorts of things that add up. You could be putting a lot of money into this thing to make, or to do, let's say $1 million, and maybe more. But, just throwing that out there that in order to do that kind of work, like, it's going to be really hard to do with old, worn out equipment. All right. So I don't have snow. It's not really an issue. So, but I know a lot of you guys do. If you're farther up north, you might be shut down for the winter. And so your season could be much shorter. Maybe some of you do snow plowing, and maybe that's a separate business. Maybe it's all in one. Maybe you calculate the snow plow numbers into your tree business. I don't know. I don't have snow. I don't know anything about it. But also consider if you get a snowstorm, like maybe you can't work. Like maybe it's a day that you'd included in your work days and you can't work because there's a snowstorm. Like, just kind of be planning for that. The other thing is it might create emergencies, which, we're not praying for emergencies, but we got to be able to respond to those. And sometimes emergency work, can be really good. It could be profitable for the business, could be profitable for your team members. And so, that could play in there as well. But again, I don't know anything about snow. Just throwing it out there because I know it is an issue for a lot of people. So do your own math. So take your dollar goal, divide that by your number of work weeks, divide that by your number of days in the week, and then you're at your dollar per day. And so let's say somebody said, all right, I'll take $1 million over 52 weeks, 6 days a week. Well, if you're doing that, and maybe you're trying to do that because you've got a smaller crew, maybe you only have a 3-man crew, or you have, maybe you have some equipment that's not going to be working as fast or something, but whatever your situation is, well, now you only need like $3,200 a day and still get to that $1 million. Let's say that you've got, maybe it snows half the year and you only have half the year to be able to do tree work. You're doing it 5 days a week, and now you're closer to $7,700 a day, to try to get to that $1 million in the half a year in tree work. So that $7,700 a day is going to look a whole lot different than a $3,000 or $4,000 a day. Maybe you do that with one crew. Maybe that includes a crane. Maybe that includes a second crew, whatever it is, but you kind of figure that up. The third example is something I just kind of threw in there. Let's say you're going out of town to work, a storm, and whatever your number is. Not saying that you should never necessarily go in there with a number like this, but let's just say you go in and you say, all right, we've got 4 weeks. We want to make $1 million, right? We want to bring in $1 million. You got 4 weeks to do it. So you divide that $1 million by the 4 weeks, and then you're going to work 7 days a week because we're only here for 4 weeks. We're going to knock everything out. Well, now you need $35,700 a day to do that. And so, what does that look like? So just be realistic with your numbers. If you think you're going to go work a storm and you're only going to stay there for a month and you're only going to work 3 or 4 days, or maybe you're working 7 days a week and you say, hey, I'm going to make $1 million, but you're only billing out $20,000 a day, like you're going to have trouble, meeting your goal. And so to get to 35 grand a day, maybe that's multiple crews, maybe that's multiple jobs per day, maybe it's, whatever it is. We're not going to talk a lot about emergency stuff, but just know if you, whatever your numbers are, this is pretty easy for you to figure that out and take your goal, divide it by the number of work weeks and then the days in that week. So to figure that out. So let's say you say, hey, you know what? We want to get to 2 million. And so I like 50 weeks, so divide it by 50 weeks, 5 a day. Now you're at $8,000 a day. So what does it take to do $8,000 a day? Can you do that with one crew? Does it make more sense to do it with 2 crews or 3 crews or, whatever it is? And you figure that up. So making the plan, figuring this out ahead of time, doing some math, sitting down with pen and paper, calculator, and coming up with some realistic numbers, I think is a much better way to do things, especially if you can look at your past numbers. You can see what you did last year, what you brought in, what you spent money on, and really try to make some realistic numbers versus, if I start out this year and I'm doing $50,000 this year, it's not very realistic for me to jump out there and say, hey, you know what, next year, I'm going to do $1 million next year. Can you do it? Yes. But you've got to be able to do some numbers like this. You got to be able to look and see how can we do that, work backwards from there, and then figure out, okay, how are we going to get there? How are we going to be able to sell this much work? Is it one customer that's going to have all this work? Is it, a bunch of different customers? We're going to have to work for somebody, maybe it's multiple jobs per day, whatever it is. But do that math, figure it up, and then try to work that plan. All right, so it's much easier on paper than it is in real life. Things come up. People get sick, weather happens, equipment breaks down, even new trucks break down, okay? But they are a lot more reliable. The economy slows down, whatever. So you don't have to come up with every contingency. You don't have to come up with every, what if this happens? What if that happens? Whatever. Come up with some major ones and figure out, kind of how you can combat that. But I just think when you're doing the calculations, don't base it on 52 weeks, 7 days, 52 weeks a year, 7 days a week. It's just, that's not realistic. So things are going to come up and try to get it to where, you are getting to your goal. If you miss it or if you overshoot it, whatever makes sense, but just be realistic when you're creating it. I tell people all the time, don't dive right in. If you're looking to get into this line of work, or maybe you're just kind of starting out, maybe I should be some motivational speaker and I should be telling you, hey, you can do it, believe in yourself and all this stuff. But really what I'm going to tell you is probably not what most people are going to say. I'm going to tell you, don't dive right in. Do not just go out there and go out on your own. Mostly because, as you've seen, like a lot of the math that people are showing you is really fuzzy math. It's not real. A lot of the math that you may have done in your head or you kind of scratched out is not real. It's not including everything in it. And so it's not as profitable as you think. You need to study business. Okay. You have to understand the numbers. You have to understand how things are going. You have to study arboriculture. You got to know trees. You got to understand how trees work. If you're in the tree business, you've got to figure out, what to do to trees. You got to understand the safety side. You got to understand the biology side. What happens when you make a cut? What happens when you prune it this way versus that way? Are you increasing risk, decreasing risk? The legalities of it. There's a whole lot of issues there. And then study leadership, because as we discussed, you can't do this kind of work alone. You have to have other people working with you. And when you have other people working with you, now as if you are the business owner and then, maybe at a certain point you get to the size where you have a manager, but, if you're a manager or even a foreman of a crew, like you're a leader and you may not be a very good leader. You may even lead people in the wrong direction. You may be a negative leader, but you need to study leadership. Because you're going to be a leader whether you want to or not. And you're either going to drive people to follow you or you're going to drive people away. You're going to piss them off. They're going to be leaving you in droves, or nobody is going to want to be around you. Like it really makes a big difference, to work on that. So anyway, I would say studying, not just delaying, you starting your business. I would say delay starting a business for a reason. Okay. Have a good, solid business plan, know what you're getting into, figure that out, before you dive right in. A lot of our audience, they're already in the business and on various, sizes. It may not be too late to kind of, slow down or stop or take a break and kind of get things in order and then crank back up. A lot of you, and I know for me, it was, I wanted to kind of figure it out as I was going along. And that's why this is created. That's why I'm doing this, is because if this was available for me, then I would have been there 100%. I would have seen every video, listened to every podcast, read every book. I just didn't know it was available. I didn't know, it wasn't available, but I didn't know which books there were to read. I didn't know what to study. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And so, that's kind of really who I'm looking for, or the people that are, looking to do a really good job of starting a business or improve the business that they're in, or really take their business to the next level. But we got to be able to start with the basics, in some of this stuff and then move up. But, leadership is really important. So that's it. Be sure to check out the website, treebusiness.com. Be sure to watch the next video. And so I know you always hear like and subscribe, but if you hit the little bell, then it'll notify you when a new video comes out. And so, that's it. I will see you on the next one.